Welcome to Raising Unstoppable Teens podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kimberly Shear, and I'm delighted to have my guest once again, Lauren Carlson, to the show. So let's welcome Lauren to the show. Yay!
Hi, thanks for having me back.
Yes. You are just have so much information regarding consent education for our children. So I just had to have a second episode because there's just so much to
Well, good.
learn.
There's lots to say.
Yes, yes. So what I'd like to do, listeners, is I'll read Lauren's bio again, in case you missed the first episode. But please, if you're watching this, go back and watch the first episode as well, because she really had some fantastic tips. Okay, so Lauren Carlson is the author of Raising Kids to Understand Consent, and she has a workbook series as well, Consent for Kids. As a mother and victim of assault, Lauren has used her experiences to guide parents and educators as they talk to children about setting boundaries and respecting others. Previously, Lauren Carlson has published the children's book, My Body is My Own, which is highly recommended by pediatricians and clinical psychologists as an entry point to begin important conversations. When Lauren is not busy writing or painting, she is juggling the life with 3 kids in the suburbs of Chicago. So once again, I'm delighted that you're here, and I'm just going to jump in with the more questions for you.
Perfect.
So how is stranger danger outdated, and how can we update the conversation with our children?
Right. So for years and years, I think even when I was growing up, we talked a lot about stranger danger and don't talk to strangers and don't take things from strangers. And I think that it's really important to understand that 90% of child abuse victims were victimized by someone very close to them. So a family member or someone that their family allowed into their circle. So instead of making children afraid of people we don't know, what we should do is help them recognize the red flag behaviors of the people that we have already allowed close to them, so that our children know to look for certain behaviors rather than just someone that we have allowed them in, so they must be safe.
That's $1 million tip right there.
Right.
So that's excellent. Thank you. What behaviors could be warning signs that your child is experiencing trauma?
Right. So I like to preface this by saying this is not specific just to sexual trauma or sexual abuse. A lot of children who are going through a family divorce or loss of a loved one will experience some of the same behaviors, but they are a behavior that your child is experiencing a trauma of some kind. So developmental setbacks. So a young child can go back to bedwetting or sucking their thumb. Also a drop in grades for older kids. A loss of interest in things that they loved, like hobbies or sports. They're just not interested in them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Things don't excite them the same way that they used to. They are a different person inside because of it. So these things are not exciting to them anymore. A loss of appetite, a loss of sleep, and mood swings that aren't normal to that child. So those are the non-sexual or warning signs. Then there are some that are specific to sexual abuse, which are an unfamiliar or a change in physical boundaries, a lack of boundaries. So if suddenly your 12-year-old is very unaware of boundaries in a way that they were not recently, it could be that someone has crossed those boundaries and they are confused in some kind of way. So if someone is playing with toys in a sexual way that is unfamiliar to you with that child, or if someone is talking about sexual instances or their body parts in a way that they never have before. Those are all things that you should take seriously and ask more questions.
I love that. And think what I'm hearing too a lot with the trauma, whether it's sexual abuse or kind of, trauma separate from that.
Right.
You're really looking for signs that are different than how your child or teenager typically behaves. So,
Right.
or even kind of their character
Right.
changes
Right.
are good indicators of
Right.
something.
So if we suddenly see a drop in grades,
Mhm.
these are not things that we would normally think, oh my goodness, what is wrong with our child? Not what are they doing wrong, but what happened? So
Mhm.
what I like to say, especially to my son, is what is holding you back from doing that?
Mhm.
Because I can think of a scenario where my son was playing football and he is the fastest one out there for his flag football team. And he wasn't able to get to this one player. And his coach said, you got to run faster. You got to run faster. And, and I said, no, come over here. What's holding you back from doing that? And he said, that kid is smaller than me and I don't want to hurt him. And then we talked about it. And see, I think if you tell your kids you have to do this and you have to get good grades, but if they're not acting the way you normally know them to act, just ask what's holding you back, because it's usually something that they want to say.
Mhm. Yes, I think there's 2 points that I also want to emphasize on what you just said, because I work with a lot of teens and particularly around grades and improving their grades and self-esteem. And I want to say that 9 times out of 10, it may not be as traumatic as a divorce. And
Right.
certainly I have not been with many teens that have been a victim of abuse, but there are underlying um, internal conflicts that they're dealing with or a sudden change, like
Right.
divorce or something like that.
Right.
And that is partially what's affecting their grades. And a lot of times they're not communicating that so much to the parent, but when
Right.
in our work together, and because we're kind of focused on grades, so it's not as tense, it just naturally flows out of them in a conversation.
Right.
So I definitely, a lot of times when there is a sudden drop in grades, it's often an indicator that something's going on. Now, again, it doesn't mean abuse and it doesn't
Right.
necessarily mean trauma, but
Right.
some things, it could be a breakup. I mean, and they're really
Right.
sad
Or
about that.
a fight with a best friend, anything,
Right.
but there's reason to ask.
Right. Exactly. And that was going to be the other thing I wanted to emphasize is, yeah, having that conversation and being honest, especially with our teens, because, sometimes it seems like we don't always want to ask. And I know I did an episode on suicide prevention and awareness. And it's like, it's okay to ask if you are concerned. Of course, I would do it privately with your teen,
Right.
but have you thought about killing yourself? I mean, especially if they've been bullied or something like that, because that gives them a permission to express themselves, and because it's harder to just spring it onto a parent, so to
Right.
speak. So,
Exactly.
and I like the way that you're saying it as well, as what's stopping you from doing that or what's
Right.
holding you up. So it's a very benign question, and it's kind of an open-ended question. So it's allowing them to say whatever it is without you kind of
Right.
influencing their answer, right?
Right. And sometimes they don't know.
Yeah.
And they have to take a look at that. I don't know why I have these mood swings.
Mhm.
I would like to figure it out. So it opens the conversation for them to think, whoa, what is on my mind? And so as a lot of times they don't know.
Right. Yeah. That's very true. So, and again, that's important because I think that to me ties in when we were talking in the first episode a little bit about boys that have been abused and not being able to really kind of the shame, extra shame in a way that could be
Yes.
associated because um, just of conditioning, and that they're not really allowed. We don't really reinforce them being in touch with different feelings other than anger. And so because of that, oftentimes we don't know what it is that we're feeling. We can't label it, and we don't know what it is that we need. And so having the parent having these discussions, gives them an opportunity that together you can kind of sort through it and kind of find that. So awesome. Okay. So if you suspect trouble, how and when can you get your child talking? So this is
right. So like I said, I do like to ask, focus your question on what thing is happening rather than why aren't you doing this? So why aren't you hugging your grandma, or why are you doing poorly in school? If you change it to say what is going on around you that is not, I don't want to say causing these things because everyone's in charge of their own actions, but what are the things that are affecting you to hold you back? If you do suspect assault or abuse in some kind of way, I always recommend talking to your child when you feel, and you don't know, but when you feel that they feel safe. So right before bed is when I do almost all of my very important conversations with my kids. Lay in bed, and that's when it's just, we can just talk, and it's quiet, and there's no one else around, and you're safe. Now, if you suspect someone in your own home, then don't do it there. Go for a drive. When this person, or when you feel they are most safe and most secure to share information with you, don't do it in front of other people. Don't do it in front of a boyfriend that you think might be not good for your child. Making your child feel that this conversation is private, it is secure, and we can talk about it. I know a lot of people might say talking while you're driving, maybe, but I like that there are very few times I get alone with one kid because I have three. So if I'm on my way to a basketball practice with one, that I do take the time to recognize that's our only alone time that day. And so those are important conversations.
Right. And I think especially with kids and even with teenagers, it's like, I like what you said, like even before bedtime, it's safe. It's and a lot of times actually that's when teens will talk to you.
Right.
To be honest. I mean, it's at midnight, not at,
Exactly. That's when I
talk. But also for parents to be mindful that it's really intense if it's kind of you're sitting down at the table and they're across from you and you expect eye contact. That is not the way to talk. Yeah, because
in the car you don't even have to look at each other. That's why in the dark in bed, and you're just saying goodnight, and it's just easy. They can close their eyes if they want. It's just relaxed. And I feel that that's when I get the most out of what's bothering my children.
Right. And I like that too, because it's almost like the defenses are coming down.
Right.
Just great opportunity. Right. Yeah. Nice. Okay. So if your child comes to you saying that they have been assaulted, what should you do or say?
Okay. So this is a story that I have told thousands of times when I had to tell my mother that I was assaulted. And I was not a teen, but I was very much innocent in so many ways. And I tell my mom that this is the story I will tell at her funeral. and when I told my mom, I'm sure she had 1,000 questions. What had happened? Where were you? Who was it? What were you wearing? Whatever, everything that people want to ask. And all my mom said was, okay, what are we going to do? And that was it. And all of those questions that my mom had, sorry, this is my favorite memory of my mom. I mean, she's still alive, but that I don't know if she could ever do anything better than this, really. All she was ready to do, all those questions will be answered. But in that moment, all she was, whether she wanted to be sad or mad or confused, all she was there ready to do something. To me, that is amazing. And if someone comes to you and and a parent questions them, well, what do you mean? How could that happen? They already feel that this is an unbelievable, shocking event to them. They have no idea what happened. So all of those questions will be answered. But in that moment, all they need to hear from you is, I believe you. And what are we going to do?
I'm just breathing that in. Wow, I have tears. The power of that, of just being present and open to receive what you have to say. And then it's like, what are we going to do?
Right.
Simple, but so significant. So wow. And we've heard it, to be present, to listen,
Right.
not judge. And we're human, as you know, and so it's sometimes just out of default. It's easy for us to want to ask those questions, to want to know why, to all these things, or even to give our advice to make
Right.
it better. And actually, the best thing we can do is listen and really be there, be really fully present.
Right.
Yeah. So, whew, wow, pretty remarkable. It's very, very. I don't know. I mean, that's advanced, because that doesn't come naturally, to not want to ask all those questions, especially as a parent.
Right. And my mom likes a question more than anyone in the world. She loves, but yes, we were 1,200 miles away, so I have no idea what she looked like when she said it. So we were over the phone, but I've always told her that was the one moment that I really needed her, and she came through.
Wow. Awesome. Okay. So if you could give one piece of advice to parents who aren't going to read the book, what one thing would you tell parents to do to protect their children?
Right. I think there are 100 million things we can do to try to protect our kids and to try to give them the tools they need to stay safe and keep other people safe. But if I could tell every parent one thing, it would be to tell their child, even before anything happens, that I'll believe you, because they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know that you'll believe them. As much as a mother, I would love to say, no, of course, my child, they know I would believe them, but they don't know, because it sounds crazy in their mind. Things that they have never imagined could have just happened to them. And they know that it sounds crazy. And they think, of course, you will think it sounds crazy, because it does, right? How could this happen? Your child needs to know, I will believe you, and you can come to me. Because if sexual abuse happens, those things will continue to happen without a victim coming forward. And a victim who is suffering by themselves, there is nothing that I can think of that hurts more than suffering when everyone else is around you laughing at Christmas dinner, and they have no idea that you are hurting. So if every parent could say that, you can come to me and I'll believe you and we'll work it out. To me, I feel like that will prevent, at least stop things from happening after they have happened the first time. And that's what I wish every parent would say to their kids.
I love that. And I think that's just something that I'm going to add to. I also like the idea of at least once a month, if not more, but at least once a month, randomly, just out of the blue, take your teen, or each child individually, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, and just acknowledge them for something that you've noticed that you're proud of them for, or just let them know that you love them unconditionally. Right. and who they've become. And that takes like just a minute, and they might roll their eyes and all of that, but it does get in there. And I think that this is kind of one of those things that really any of us can't be reminded too often.
Right.
To even just every now and then let your child know that no matter what, I will support you and I believe in you. I will believe you. And no matter how scary something has happened or whatever. Um, because you're right. And I think also you're right in that they don't know it. And especially after there's been some kind of shock or trauma, it's almost they're in disbelief and they can't, they're not making sense of it either. It's like just this big, I don't know, like this wart all of a sudden. It's like, ugh, and so um so just knowing that they can go to someone, or that you'll believe them
Right.
is so critical.
And it's an invitation to tell. So I've said this many times that when I do talk about my story, I believe every time I share, I don't go into details, but every time I talk about being a victim of assault, it's an invitation for someone to come forward.
Right.
And I think that's amazingly powerful because we have seen over the last few years how powerful it is when everyone stops being afraid and can say what has happened to them, and it gives people their power back and knowing that they are important.
Mhm.
So every time you say, I will believe you, or do you want to say anything to me, or do you have anything that's holding you back, you're inviting your child to say anything to them, whether it's trauma or just a fight they had with their best friend.
Right.
You are allowing them the opportunity to say anything because they might think that you don't think it's important. These are just kid problems or whatever. And I think it's amazing to just allow your kid the knowledge to know that you think they are important.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to add also with that one of the things that I'm a firm believer in, and again, all these are simple things, but it's a matter of consistently doing them. And that is really having regularly scheduled family meetings, as well as just one-to-one check-ins.
Right.
Because the power of that is like when I was listening to you talk, like, even if it's just a fight with their best friend, and they're like, it's not that important, or you're not going to care as a parent, because they see you working hard. They may overhear you saying, oh, I'm so stressed and all of that. They don't want to add to that.
Right.
That's also a piece to it. So they might not share. But if they know that every Saturday or every other Saturday from 10 to 10:30, it's their time,
Right.
sometimes they can table that or they can journal about it. But knowing they have that time, that's when maybe it can come forward, or that you could talk, or that they really are getting the message just by you setting that special time for them. The message is you are important, you do matter, and I care what's going on for you, whether it's mundane or all the way up to traumatic,
Right.
whatever that is, I am
Right.
here for you. And that's the lasting message. And I think that then becomes ingrained in them, and you have more of a better relationship because of it, I think.
Right. And a more confident child. And
So,
and I love that.
yeah. Awesome. So I would like for you to just tell us a little bit the title of your book, and some more about it. Like it's brilliant, how you've laid it out, and just what our listeners can expect.
Sure. Okay. So the book is called Raising Kids to Understand Consent. It is a parent's guide to incorporating consent education into your everyday living. So it's not meant to be one conversation and then you never talk about it again. It's a way to truly change the way you think of their feelings and they think of their feelings, and how to do that every single day with small changes or small ways of thinking. It's broken down by age groups. So if you have a child who's 3 and you want to incorporate this at the very beginning, which is how I raised my children and how I wish everyone would raise their children, um, there's a group of 4 and under, a group of 5 to 8, an age group of 9 to 12 and an age group of 13 to 16. So both of the first chapters where you're setting boundaries and respecting the boundaries of others, there's different examples and different talking points for each age group. So readers can just skip to their 13 and 16 if they only have teenagers and skip over the little kid stuff. Or if you're reading it for the first time and you read the 5 to 8 and then you save it and read it again in 3 years, and your child is not the same, and setting their goals and their boundaries are not the same. So every section has different talking points, different goals for that age, and it's broken down like that. The final chapters are about sexual abuse and how to use your voice again with an adult who is potentially dangerous. So you're teaching your child those are all the same for all the age groups, because in that scenario, a kid is a kid and they are looking up at a person of authority. No matter if they're 13 or 4, they are the same way viewing this adult as someone they don't know how to say no to. So that's what this book is. It is truly my way of helping people say all of the things and teach all of the things I wish I knew. And as a mom, it's all of the things that I know we wish our kids already knew. And sometimes they don't. And how can you say it? So it is a perfect way to read it. There are some parts you read with your child, and then there's scenarios that you go over and you can talk about them. So it's Raising Kids to Understand Consent. It's available on Amazon. It's also available on my website, which is www.imperfectlybold.com. And I also have children's books and workbooks, but this is the one for parents that if you read it, it has everything that I know about consent and everything to help your kids grow up to be healthy and happy children, which I think is all that we want.
Yes, and safe, right?
Right, exactly.
Happy, healthy, safe, and confident. And I think that's what this book is all helping us as parents do. And what I love about your book, and yes, I've read it, and I do highly, highly, highly recommend it, because it's one of those books that I love, Lauren. Again, I think this is just brilliant, where maybe you have a 5-year-old, but this book goes all the way up to, late teens. And so it's kind of like a household manual, if you will, that you can reference book. That's what I want to say.
Right.
That you can constantly reference. But the other part I love about the book is that I love the scenarios, because it's not, I believe that kids and teenagers especially are more receptive when we're guiding them. And I think that they can own and embody the lessons more when we guide them in the process of discovery. And your scenarios, it's not one of those things like, if your child says this, then say this. It's like, here's a scenario, and then you're asking questions. So it's getting, I'm thinking of teens primarily, but the older kids too, to even the younger ones, because the scenarios are age appropriate in this book, obviously. But it gets them to think critically. What are they feeling? What would be, better discernment too. Just skills that don't necessarily come naturally. And by using this book, it's like you get 2 wins, I guess, because you're talking about consent and how to keep them safe and all of that, but and opening communication. But it's also a way to just get them into kind of more of a habit, if you will, of thinking more critically about things, as well.
Right. So that is something that I find important. A lot of people will skip over a scenario if they see, oh, well, that's about a girl and I'm reading to my son. And I really think that's not helpful. I think that every time you talk about, here's someone in a situation, whether you can relate to that person or not, you should be able to see, hey, she might be uncomfortable there.
Mhm.
And I think it's amazing to read it. And then, so what I'll do is I'll ask a question, and then you and your child talk about it. And then I continue. Well, she chose to do this. What do you think that was effectively setting her boundaries, or do you think she should have done something else? And then we talk about it.
Mhm.
And then at the end, okay, now she has gone to her teacher and said this. And I think that it is important for your child to say that maybe that's not something that would bother them, but it is bothering this girl.
Mhm.
And I think that every one of these scenarios, whether it is about you or whether it's something that would bother you, you're getting your child to think this is a different person
Mhm.
who has a different boundary,
Mhm.
and that's okay. And every one of those is telling them to think differently. And I truly do believe that we can raise children who have a better understanding of consent than our generation or the generations before us. And we can raise mindfully, uh, intelligent children.
Mhm. Beautifully stated, Lauren. So, listeners, I'd like to say that Lauren has also generously is offering a free gift of it's really kind of what I'm going to call I guess, a reference poster, so to speak, of the red flags, what to watch out for with potentially dangerous scenarios, really, right? Or
Right,
just,
right. What to look for if an adult is potentially dangerous, right? I don't like to say that these behaviors mean someone is a sexual predator, but definitely something to watch for.
Mhm. Yeah, which I like kind of your idea of the red flags. Just a
Right,
flag, just note it. That's all.
right, right.
Right. So,
They're all data points. None of them lead to something, but they're all there and you have to be aware of them.
love that. So you can find that gift on unstoppableteenspodcast.com. So on that website, as well as the audio version of this interview will also, and of the first episode will also be on that website. Um, so I want to thank you for being so generous with that. That's really nice to have, and just have it posted and be mindful of that. So thank you. And thank you again for being with us. And yeah, that concludes our show.
Thank you
So
so much for having me. I love sharing my information and having people hear it and be receptive to it. It touches me. I love that.
mhm, you're very dedicated,
I
very dedicated to this cause, and perhaps even a movement. I mean, again, I think this book is something every household is a book every household should have, but I would love to see this in schools too.
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely. Thank you
yeah,
so much.
yeah. You are welcome. So here's to unstoppable teens, unstoppable dreams.